Well, man, we find ourselves in the studio, guestless.
Yeah, here we are.
So it's the audience gets just you and I, but we get some feedback. People like these types of shows.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to just kind of talk about what's on our minds.
Whatever's on our mind. And
Yeah,
what's on your mind today, my friend?
Well, we're a month into the new year, right? We're rocking and rolling toward our business goals, and I think it would be a good time now to sort of check in on how are we progressing toward our goals, and more specifically, what is our behaviors and our habits that are going to help lead us to our goals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, F.M. Alexander says that we don't decide our future, we decide our habits, and our habits decide our future, right? And for anyone that has listened to this podcast, they've probably heard us say that before. And we talk about time management, we talk about behavior, we talk about action, and really, that all has to do with habits and habit forming and habit stacking and temptation bundling and all these different ideas that for you and I think a lot of our learning around this has come from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah, absolutely. He really lays out, what is a habit? How do you recognize different habits? What are the triggers, and how do you take more control of them? So let's sort of start with what is the definition of a habit? Like, we all sort of have them. We all kind of know what it is, but what is it actually?
Yeah, could I step it back one more word even?
Yeah.
To atomic?
Yeah.
Because for me, I think this book made such an impact on me and this concept of atomic habits, because when I think atomic, as I think a lot of people do, we think big.
Right.
We think,
atomic bomb.
Exactly. Atomic bomb. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or whatever.
Right.
Did I say the second? Is that the second city?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just questioned myself.
You should have just kept rolling.
I should have just kept rolling. Yeah, whatever. The atomic bomb. Big mushroom cloud. Big explosion. And yet, really, if you look in the dictionary, that's not actually the definition, right? Atomic is an extremely small amount of something. The single irreducible unit of a larger system. It's the source of immense energy or power. And I think that when we set goals, when we think about vision, it's often easier to think high level, big picture, but then not know where to go. And when we talk about habits, the smaller we can get, the better success we're going to have. And so that's atomic. So how about the word habit, right? So what does habit mean? Well, James Clear defines a habit as a routine or practice performed regularly, an automatic response to a specific situation.
And that's something I want to pick up on right there, an automatic response, right? So the human brain has developed habits as a way of dealing with the same challenges or the same problems the same way over and over. It saves us time, right? So every time I wake up in the morning, I don't have to think about what exactly do I want to do right now. Our habits kick in our unconscious brain, which force us, in my case, to get up and to, and go start my routine, right? And that's true for most people. So it's dealing with those same sort of scenarios each day more effectively.
So how does a habit relate to the unconscious mind? Because when I think automatic, I also think unconscious mind. There's kind of this interplay, if you will, right?
Yeah, and what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits is that, first of all, there's always a trigger, right? And so a trigger is something that you can see, smell, taste, touch, or hear, right? Mm-hmm. Any of your five senses, there can be a trigger, which then creates this craving, right? This desire to find out. Now, this craving can be conscious or unconscious, right? You can say, the smell of cookies smell good, I want to go get some cookies, or you could smell cookies and just find yourself in the kitchen, in the cabinet, grabbing that bag of cookies, right?
Exactly.
It can be like an unconscious reaction almost. In some cases, that's obviously a silly example, but you can see how this would start showing up in business and in our whole lives.
And I think that we sometimes don't even realize that, businesses build revenue growth strategies around the senses and these cues, right? I mean, you just said smell of cookies, right? The hotel industry literally drives revenue by aromatherapy,
right,
pumping through their AC systems.
Right.
And so I think that's just one example when we think about habits and we think about cue or triggers of just, this is powerful. This is a big concept that we've really got to understand. So you just said, Joe, that the trigger then prompts a craving, right? And so what we're doing here already is we're kind of walking through this progression, this, the science of how a habit works. So how would we define a craving? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I guess simply put, it's going to be a desire to want to take some sort of action, right? So when I, for example, hear my phone buzz, the craving is I want to know what the message says.
We've all had those phantom thigh buzzes,
exactly. right. You think you feel something and there's nothing going on. But what do? You check your phone anyway.
I check my phone.
And then you see nothing, you're like, oh gosh, that was silly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that trigger, that craving produces that response, which he says is the third step.
Another example of a craving is, you ever like, let's just use McDonald's because we all know McDonald's. You're not even hungry. You drive by, you see those golden arches, and now all of a sudden you start thinking about food a lot more.
Crispy fries.
And now all of a sudden I'm starting to feel hungry. Well, I wasn't 2 minutes ago, but that visual trigger started to create this internal craving.
Yeah. This is completely unrelated, but you seen those new build your own secret menu items that they're publicizing now?
At the McDonald's?
At the McDonald's.
Well, no.
Okay, so they're just disgusting. So one of them, fish, they call it the air, land, and sea, and it's a smash up of the fillet of fish, a burger, and a grilled chicken sandwich all together. It looks absolutely disgusting.
I've got to say, I actually like the name. That was the Marine Corps motto right there. Air, land, and sea. Maybe I'll go check one out.
Maybe they need a new ad around. Maybe it was a Marine that came up with it. Anyway, so we then have this response, right? This response is the actual habit that we perform, and it can take the form of a thought or an action. And so that response that we have comes next. And then finally, the last thing, that response delivers a reward. And so, let's talk a little bit about dopamine, shall we?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And so when we have a reward, dopamine is essentially that chemical that hits our brain and makes us feel good.
It's the happy drug.
It's the happy drug.
That exists inside of us naturally.
Yeah.
Dopamine. And what's interesting, David, is that what James Clear talks about is not only achieving the reward that creates the dopamine, but the anticipation of achieving the reward will create massive spikes in dopamine also. So thinking about what you're going to achieve actually creates dopamine. And so that's why we say things like write down your goals, gain clarity around what you want to achieve. Because when you start moving toward those goals, just anticipating closing those 24 units or nailing that listing appointment is going to start creating that happy chemical in your brain.
Yeah, he breaks it down in the different stages as you're going through habit development of, again, like you said, where that dopamine falls inside this kind of progression that we've been talking about of trigger, craving, response, and reward. And he says, like you kind of just mentioned, Joe, that dopamine spikes first in that reward stage, right? Like we're doing this thing that we maybe absolutely hate. We hate it all the way through, and then we get that reward, that intended result, and the dopamine spikes. Later, as we start down that path of this is actually becoming a habit, the anticipation, the pulling into the gym in the morning, on the flip side, if we don't accomplish the habit, right, there's that letdown in the dopamine, right? And so there's these peaks and these valleys where dopamine is released or it is not being released as we form the habits. I think that's very, very interesting to understand.
Well, you just brought up a good point, which is sort of the peaks and valleys. And a simple example of that came to mind right away is I have a morning routine, like I mentioned. And when I crush my morning routine, I feel good. I walk out my door feeling like I'm on cloud nine. But if I don't execute that morning routine, I'm already in a lull. And to your point, it's because it's almost like I'm missing the anticipated reward because I didn't follow through with the actions. Yeah. So it creates that valley in dopamine versus the spike.
Right.
Which is an interesting. I've just never thought about it that way, so I wanted to kind of unpack that a little.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. And when you were just saying that, it kind of made me. I guess it's not a one-to-one comparison, man, but I think about just like if I'm behind schedule to start the day 5 minutes, like it tends to mirror the rest of my day. I feel like I'm rushing, and, all those things. And so I feel like it's almost similar. Like if I get that anticipation dopamine hit and the reward hit, like that keeps me moving in this like happy cycle throughout the rest of my day.
Right.
Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about that's the cycle of habit forming. How long do you think it takes to develop a habit?
Well, that's a that's a popular topic of conversation, right? And at Keller Williams, we talk a lot about this 66 days, and I think what most people would agree to is that it's not so much the amount of time, but rather the amount of repetition within that time. So if I'm doing the same activity every day consistently, it may take fewer days for it to form into a habit than if I'm doing it every other day or once a week. So it's more about the repetition of the activity than the amount of time.
You know what? I don't know if I've ever actually heard it put that way, which means I haven't sat through your class on atomic habits. So shame on me. Slap my wrist, because that's really, really helpful. And it makes me think of, all work expands to fill the time allowed, and collapsing time frames, very similar. I think habits form in the time that we allow based on the repetition. So
right.
I think that's really good.
Well, and what's really cool about this whole conversation is that once you start developing a habit, it actually becomes more easy to execute that activity because of what you were saying about the anticipated dopamine. It will feel weird not to do the habit, and so this can be true for even things that don't feel normal right now, right? And I relate this to lead generation a lot. I tell agents, hey, unless you were in a sales position prior to real estate, you're probably not in the habit of waking up every day and picking up the phone and calling 10 or 15 or 20 people. That probably just wasn't part of your routine. So for it to begin to become a habit, it's going to feel a little weird, a little clunky, a little difficult at times. But as you start to do it consistently, being the key word, waking up in the morning and not lead generating is actually going to start to feel weird. It's going to feel like something's missing. It's going to feel like you want to go do it. And so what I try to tell agents, especially that are new, is don't be surprised that it's not normal yet. And your consistent repetition is going to allow this to feel like something you want to do every day because you can anticipate the rewards of those actions.
Definitely. So let's go into James Clear's 4 laws, right? So first law of habit forming is make it obvious.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we should keep relating this to lead generation if we can. So let's give listeners some concrete examples around these 4 laws as it pertains to picking up the phone. Right? Because I find more often than not, and you correct me if you get picking up the phone. That's the million pound brick, and I find a lot of agents struggle with that. And so let's kind of just relate it to picking up the phone and creating habits around lead generation. So make it obvious. So I think it's important for us when we think about our lead generation strategy to get really, really clear about what we're doing. So in this case, picking up the phone. How do we make it obvious?
I mean, I think of visual cues right away. So, for example, I'm going to go off track, but I'll bring it back.
It's all right.
I am becoming a better reader, right? And so to make it obvious, I leave my book on my nightstand. I can't go to bed without at least seeing the book visually. So if you want to make lead generation obvious to you, something you may do is take, for example, a list of contacts you're going to call, or your script you're going to use,
book, yeah.
or the tracker you're going to use to track these conversations, and put it on your desk, maybe even right on top of your keyboard before you leave work at night, so that the next day you come in and you can't not see it. It's right there in front of you.
It's right there.
It's obvious.
Right. And I think early when I was in lead generation in a different industry, it was, hey, my call list had to be prepared the night before. All the names, all the phone numbers, on top of my laptop, ready to go. And yes, I had the luxury of someone helping me do that and pulling those. Maybe an agent doesn't have that. Maybe you have to become your own assistant the night before and set those names and phone numbers out.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that comes to mind, which is sort of an obvious answer for making it obvious, is put it on your calendar. Right? Hopefully you're using a calendar. And when we say to put lead generation on your calendar, for some people it works just to write lead generation. If that's not working for you, get more specific. From 8:30 to 9, I'm going to call 5 FSBOs or 10 FSBOs or however many FSBOs I can fit in that 30 minutes. From 9 to 9:30, I'm going to call my top 5 database, my VIPs from my sphere of influence or whatever. So the point there just being you can be more specific with your time blocks if it's going to be helpful to you than just saying lead generation and then having to decide what am I going to do today.
Yeah, definitely. So the next law is make it attractive. All right, so making it attractive. And I forget what the examples are that he gives in making it attractive. Can you?
Well, one thing to make it attractive would be to give yourself a little reward for completing the task. So you can make it attractive by saying, okay, once I've done my 10 phone calls, then I've earned a 15-minute break, or I've earned a lunch break, or I've earned the right to listen to whatever podcast I want to, or whatever, right? You can give yourself a little incentive, a little reward to make it as attractive as possible. Also, making it simple for yourself, right, which is going to be the next law. Making it as easy as possible is going to be another way to make it attractive as it pertains to lead generation.
Another idea that I really like is this concept of temptation bundling that he talks about in there. And so essentially giving yourself this reward with something that isn't necessarily a great habit, but it's something that you're currently doing, something that you currently want. And he gives an equation. He says habit stacking plus temptation bundling is after I insert current habit, I will insert habit I need. After habit I need, I will habit I want. And that's just a really interesting, thing there. And he gives an example. So maybe that didn't make sense to you, but he says, after I get my morning coffee, I will say one thing I'm grateful for that happened yesterday. After I say one thing I'm grateful for, I will read the news. And so in this idea, someone wants to read the news, but they need to express more gratitude in their life. And as we can probably understand because of the crapshoot that the world sometimes is, once you watch the news, it's hard to express gratitude.
Right.
So what he's doing is he's bundling this habit of expressing gratitude with a habit that he wants, which is watching the news.
And those are both attached to the habit he already has, which is drinking the coffee.
The morning coffee. Exactly. So there's that progression there. And it's interesting this is so scientific.
Yeah.
And I think we've probably known this for hundreds and thousands of years, but now we actually understand the brain chemistry behind it.
Right. The other thing I would add to making it attractive is really understanding the results of the activity, right, in the first place. Hopefully, if this is something that you're committed to creating as a habit, you understand the domino effect that this habit is going to have in your life. For example, if I lead generate consistently for 1 hour every day, I can reach my income goal. And so as I'm saying all that, I believe that it would be helpful if you really can attach yourself to the outcome that you want with that habit. So really being able to see what you will see when you achieve that outcome, feel the feelings when you achieve that outcome, see the impact it has on the other areas of your life when you achieve that outcome, so that when I see that time block, it's more attractive because I'm immediately thinking about what I'm going to get from it, not the pain of what I have to do to go through it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So let's talk a little bit in this making it attractive with the role of, the people, the environment that we're in, because that plays a really big role. And I think, bringing back to our example of lead generating, right? Mm-hmm. If I am going to become a better lead generator on the phone, I should be in a place where the culture is attractive to be a lead generator on the phone. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah, because if I'm in a culture where my desired behavior is already being modeled and it's being modeled at a level that is, very effective, I naturally have this gravitational pull to want to fit into the many. Right?
Exactly. And what's beautiful is that you're going to want to stick around an environment like that because it's going to help elevate you, and the people around you are going to accept nothing less. Yeah. That's the whole idea behind becoming who you surround yourself with. And like you're saying, in an environment, if I want to be a productive real estate agent, I need to go hang around some productive real estate agents, because if I'm hanging around unproductive real estate agents, guess what I'm going to start to act like? Those
unproductive agents.
Right. 3-hour lunch breaks in the middle of the day and rolling into the office at 10 a.m., right?
Exactly.
That's not the habits we want to create, so those aren't the people I'm going to spend my time with.
Yeah, definitely. And he gives this really interesting example, and I bring it up here because again, I think we underestimate this sometimes. He gives this example of this old psychologist, Solomon Asch, who conducts this experiment where he draws essentially a 6-inch line on a piece of paper. And then on the other piece of paper, he has a 3-inch line, a 1-inch line, and a 6-inch line. And he talks about when he brought a few people into the room and basically planted some moles, right? He planted some moles, and 1 or 2 people say that it's the 1-inch line that is the same length as the 6-inch line. And we hear that and we go, okay, 1 inch, 6 inch, not even close, right? And so people look at that 1 or the 2 people and they say, okay, they're just crazy. They're nuts. They're just psycho, right? But then as he starts adding in dozens of moles, as he adds in hundreds of moles, and the hundreds of people start pointing at the 1-inch line and saying that's the same length as the 6-inch line, all the people that were not planted, we're not actors, start to desire to fit in and say and agree that it's the 1-inch line that's the same as the 6-inch line.
Yeah.
And we think of that from the outside looking in, that looks absurd. I mean, we're talking 6 times difference. And yet we have this gravitational pull. I use the word gravitational pull because it is. It like sucks us in.
Right.
And it's the natural bent of our, our psychology.
It's almost like an instinct to want to fit in and to want to belong to the masses. And so if everybody is going one direction, saying one thing, we don't want to make ourselves the outsider.
Yeah.
Even if it's going against everything we think we know in our heads about logic.
Exactly. So, making it attractive, making it easy, making it obvious. So I want to talk again a little bit about environment because, we've been working hard at our real estate brokerage right now. Like, what does a productive real estate environment look like? And even I was sharing with a group yesterday, like I moved our call night to the front conference rooms so that the very first thing you heard last night when you walked into the office was people on the phones laughing and having a good time. And like, to me, that has an effect on your psyche, right? And we've just been more intentional and purposeful about that in our offices. And I think it's having a great effect. What do you think about, we've talked about the people involved in the environment, but even the environmental design of a place.
Well, I'm going to backtrack really, really fast and just say that environment and time are the 2 most common cues or triggers to a habit.
Okay.
Environment and time. So I'm going to get back to your question, but I think about environment like if I want to for example, cook a healthier breakfast in the morning, I can actually set out the cooking utensils, the cooking ingredients, whatever doesn't need to be refrigerated the night before, so that when I wake up and I walk into the kitchen, the environment is set up for me to take a particular action. So applying this back now to real estate, same thing. When we create an environment of productivity for our agents, we want them to come in and for it to be natural for them to take the behavior, take the action that's going to lead to the result. So people talking on the phone. So, well, the environment needs to have cell phone service, right? Or access to phones. It needs to have all the tools that you're going to need to be able to lead generate, the list of names and phone numbers, a CRM to track it all, and a lack of distractions, right? So the environment also has to contain a lack of distractions that are going to take me off course.
I'm glad you brought it there because, having call night at the front of the office, better cell phone reception up there too anyway, so that's something else I got to work on.
Well, there you
go. So, a perfect example in my life of, he actually calls this, he names it the law of least resistance, I think is what Clear says. And, and we can reduce the friction in an environment and make a habit fit into the natural flow of our life. It becomes easier to create.
Yeah.
And for me, like that's played out in my life in the gym. Like I had to because I originally hated the gym. And if I was going to become a gym I don't even know a weightlifter.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. If I'm going to become a weightlifter, it needs to fit in the flow of my life. And so backtracking, the atomic habits, the atomic pieces that I had to put together was, hey, I had to buy the Black membership, which allowed me all the access into all the different gyms that were on the 3 different paths that I took to various offices in the valley. And so now I have a gym right on our North Highway, right on our Middle Highway, and right on the South Highway. No matter which office I'm going to, the gym is right there on the way. Take a quick turn, and I'm at the gym. And I believe that was crucial. It was critical to my success. And that was just another way of environmentally designing it so that it made it easier to create this habit. Any examples that stick out to you for you?
Well, that's a great example of how logistically and geographically this habit is easier. Then let's talk about what happens when you actually get inside the gym, or what happens when you do sit down to lead generate for the first couple of times. Sort of going along with this idea of keeping it easy, choose a rep count that's going to be something that you can complete the first few times. Set yourself up for success, not failure, right? So if it's my first day doing push-ups, my goal is not going to be to do 100 push-ups because that takes a lot of effort. I may not do it. It may be discouraging. So what if I do 10 push-ups today? I could do 10 push-ups, and then maybe tomorrow or next week I begin to do 15 and then 20. And so the idea is choose a rep count that you're going to be able to achieve. So if you're starting to lead generate and you've never done this before, pick up the phone and have 3 or 4 really high-quality conversations today. And then tomorrow have 5 or 6. And then the next week have 8 or 9 or 10 or 12. And allow yourself to gradually build, because if you make it too hard, you're less likely to follow through, you're less likely to have a positive result, and you're less likely to turn this action into a habit.
Was just working on this with a client 2 weeks ago. And, they first put on their GPS, their business plan, I'm going to do 20 phone calls every single day. They're not even doing 1 phone call every day right now. Right? And so I said, exactly what you just said, Joe. You have to pick what you're going to be committed to, because what I'm worried about and what she needs to be worried about is the muscle memory that she's developing in the habit. That is way more important. If we can get that muscle memory, just like lifting weights, to where it needs to be, my arms go in this direction just a couple of times, then I'm going to naturally be able to go up 5 to 10% every single time my muscles recover. My brain's going to be able to do the same thing. So if I start at 5, I'm going to be able to go to 6 the next day. I'm going to be able to go to 10 the next day. I'm going to be able to go, and it's going to naturally progress. And so think about these analogies with muscle building, I think, are so helpful. Think about your lead generation efforts in the same vein.
Well, and people like Tony Robbins refer to our brains and really more to our activities and our behaviors as muscles that we have to develop, right? They're the way that we think about habits, the way that we create habits. These are just thought patterns that we can begin to change too. So even the thoughts you have patterns. And so if we can start to identify some of the patterns in our own head, we can. What am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to do is relate the idea of thought habits to the idea that if you can change the thoughts in your head, it then becomes even easier to make a habit. I don't feel like I'm saying it well at all.
We're gonna figure it out.
We're gonna figure this piece out.
We're gonna just work on this together.
Let me start with this.
Say it one more time. Let's work through it.
Let me start with a question, David.
Okay.
Would you agree that we have certain habits with the way we think?
Yeah.
Certain and positive and negative, right?
Both.
Good and bad.
Yes.
And those thought patterns lead to predictable behaviors.
Yes. Okay. All right. We're kind of having a conversation about PT FAR. Right?
True. Well, yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Which you're a master at. Is that what you're... Okay, we're making this connection between... Keep going.
Right. So the thoughts lead to the feelings in our body,
Yep.
which is why I mentioned create a feeling that's going to be most energizing for you.
Yep.
The feelings then lead to the behaviors, lead to the actions.
Definitely.
Those actions give us a result, either good or bad.
Yep.
Which give our brains new information to process, which then leads right back to our thoughts.
Yep.
That's why it's called the PT-FAR thought cycle, because
Right.
it just keeps going over and over and over.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And so it reinforces. It's this cycle that's reinforcing and giving our brains new information to gather from. So it's really another way of, it's almost it's like a micro peek into each of the different stages that we're talking about when forming a habit. So let's go into the fourth law of making it satisfying, okay? When you're trying to create a good habit, break a bad habit, it needs to be satisfying at the end. So I think one of the things that, I find oftentimes, especially when you're in business and you're running a busy, you have a busy life, you're running this business, people don't take time to actually recognize and reward themselves.
Right.
Right. And so, not to skip to a different book altogether, but this is one reason I love the 12-week year. The 12-week year concept of mapping out your goals quarterly in a 12-week process actually works, I believe, because of this idea of reward. By the time you get to the end of the 12th week and you've accomplished what it is you set out to accomplish, you then reward yourself. And so then, bringing that back to habits, there needs to be some type of reward. And it doesn't mean, you're going out to buy something or going on vacation. It's really, again, back to this, hey, when I do this action, it produces a result. And that result, that reward stage is, this dopamine, right?
Yeah.
So what else do you have to add about making it satisfying?
Well, think about kids in kindergarten. They do something good that the teacher likes, they get a gold star for the day. That's a reward. The idea is to continue to incentivize that positive behavior. And so as adults, we fall out of the habit of rewarding ourselves, right? We don't give ourselves gold stars, obviously. We don't
wish we did.
I know, right? I'll give you a gold star. So what can happen, David, is all this hard work can lead to progress, but if we're only focused on all the areas we still want to improve, we're never looking at the progress we're making. And this is particularly true for adults versus kids. And so what I say to adult real estate agents is we have to slow down enough to recognize the progress being made, to use that as fuel to continue making progress. And I'm guilty of this myself. I focus so much on what I want to create, what I want to accomplish, the skills I want to develop, that I don't often enough slow down and say, well, look at all the cool things I've done in the past year.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. That's pretty motivating. That makes me want to pick up another book.
This should be a different topic and a different episode, and we're going to do it. It's why you'd be more successful at business if you thought and acted like a kid.
I like it.
Like the vision, the imagination, the actual execution, the rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing. I might even write a book.
I like that.
I feel a book coming on. But yeah, no, I think that people need to reward themselves. They need to slow down enough to recognize the reward. If not, then I think that your success really has a short time horizon.
Yeah.
I think it really does.
And one more thing on making it attractive, who can you share your intentions with? We talk about coaches and accountability partners, but even just at the family level, like who's somebody that's significant to you that you wouldn't want to let down, and that would be happy for you when you achieve your result, and let them know what your intentions are. And so, part of making it attractive is going and celebrating that victory with that other person. It also serves as an accountability measure to help keep you pushing forward even when it feels challenging. Because what's interesting, David, is people are typically far more common will let themselves down versus let other people down.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there's all kinds of things that I've thought in my head that I intended to do that I never followed through with. So in a weird way, we kind of let ourselves down more often than we let anybody else down anyway.
Right.
But I wouldn't want to think about the day that I have to tell you as a business partner I didn't do my responsibility. That's far more concerning to me.
Yeah.
Right? So I use that when you hear about accountability partners and why you may hear about it so often. The intention there is we all will step up our game when being looked at by another person.
Definitely. And that's why I love doing this podcast with you, man.
There we are,
sharing our intentions, sharing our goals. So we're gonna be in Orlando in the next week.
Yeah,
and I think we're gonna do some fun live recording, things like that. And so be on the lookout on our social media. Hey, you know what? We haven't said that in a while. I mean, follow us on Instagram. Joe, what's your handle?
Yeah, Joe.Quattrucci.
And mine is David D. Morse. Follow us on there. Follow us on Facebook. Stay connected with us between episodes. If you have an awesome guest that we have not interviewed and you say, man, David and Joe, get them on the podcast, send them our way. We'd love to interview them. And with that, we will sign off until Orlando and when we're back with you next time. So, as always, go play all in.